Right, so on Friday, the infamous tennis Netflix series Breakpoint was released. Let's break it down. So this Friday night, I sat down to watch the highly anticipated tennis Netflix series. I was expecting drama, controversy, behind-the-scenes footage, access, and more. And after 4 straight hours of watching later, it was over. So, what did I think?
Where do I start? Obviously, I think the season overall was very interesting to watch. There were lots of great insights into what all of the players were doing on an individual basis, but there were also some bits where I was a little bit disappointed from the perspective of obviously a player myself, of where I think they could have shown a little bit more or shown a little bit more drama to try and keep the series a bit more lively, especially for those new viewers who are going to be watching it who don't know so much about tennis. But let's jump into that, and then a bit later on I'm going to be talking with my coach Ashley on some of the key bits in the series to give a coach-player perspective on them. And at the end I'm going to be rating each episode out of 10 and giving my overall ranking for the series. Now, what I did think they do really well is create a great atmosphere around telling the story of a player. Looking at the Nick Kyrgios episode to begin with, showing his journey of behind the scenes, coming into the tournament having not played loads of tennis and performing on the highest stage, winning the doubles, which is obviously impressive. And also, for example, Taylor Fritz, when he picked up that ankle injury just before the Indian Wells final, showing that journey of him going and winning the title, which is obviously something as a viewer, even knowing tennis, that I didn't really know had happened beforehand. So it kind of gave a good insight onto exactly what had happened there. Obviously, from my perspective as a professional tennis player, I know a lot about tennis and I read a lot about tennis. I'm sure you guys do as well, but some people who are watching this Netflix series maybe don't. So if you're new to tennis, I'd like to know what you think down in the comments down below. I think for someone that's being introduced to the sport, it's a great advocate for exactly how the tour works, what players go through on a week-by-week basis, but I don't think it gives you the full perspective. So I think that hopefully in the next part of the season, they're going to give a bit more of an insight into maybe what some of the other players are facing and how the community of tennis players together really works. I've been at Wimbledon, I've been in the players area. There's a real buzz, there's a real atmosphere. A lot of the players kind of talking to one another, interacting with one another, training with one another. I don't think they really brought that across as much as they could have. And so if you've watched part 1 of the series, then you'd know a lot of the interactions are between players and their coaches. So I thought, what better way to react to some of the key moments and give my insights and someone else's insights and hear their thoughts on those moments than with my coach Ashley. So let's see what he has to think about the Breakpoint. Series. Right, so today me and Ash are going to be giving our reactions and first thoughts on the new Netflix series Breakpoint. We're going to break down 3 or 4 interesting moments as well that we thought were particularly interesting and getting a bit of a difference of opinion between a player and a coach. Let's go. Also guys, as of right now, I'm back to training, back on court with my coach Ashley. So next week, I'm going to be showing you my first training session back, which I'm super pumped for. So make sure that you subscribe and turn the bell notification on. Super pumped. I hope you guys are too. And now back to the video. So let's just jump straight in. The first episode mainly focused around the main man, Nick Kyrgios at the Australian Open. I think it was a big one to kick it off. I was expecting kind of big things. Overall, I thought it was a decent episode. It gave a good insight into Nick and it kind of showed him in certain situations. Like, for example, what I really liked was before the Liam Brody match, he's like, oh, what a competitor. That was quite funny, and kind of having that interaction between the players, which some other players don't have. He has that confidence.
100%. Liam's a funny guy anyway, but when you see the interactions, you know, you see in the tunnel.
He's so relaxed, it's unbelievable.
And love that. You see Rafa in the tunnel with Felix in one of the later episodes, and Rafa in the tunnel with Casper, and there's dead silence, and you know, you could see they're both really getting themselves G'd up. These guys were just having fun. I have 2 very differing opinions about Nick, and you might agree, you might disagree, but my 2 opinions are this. One, I think he is incredible for the sport, and I think every sport needs somebody of his sort of character and style that brings in a completely different audience. And so, you know, I think Netflix were right in putting him in the first episode as the kind of driving force behind this one. On the flip side of this, I'm looking at as a perspective, I work with lots of young players, you know, I work with yourself as well, and I need players who are amazing role models, and unfortunately, you know, looking at episode 1, I can't have my younger kiddies that I'm coaching watching it because he's swearing, he's smashing up rackets, but also because Nick is 1 in a million, he can get away with how he is off court. He's very, very blasé and relaxed, and he doesn't train as much as most players, he doesn't take it as seriously as most players. 99.9% of players need to graft hard. You know what it's like in training. You need to work 100%. You need to be 100% focused. He's not, and he's still at the level he is, and that can give a false sense of what you need to be a tennis player for some. So, you know, kids growing up watching him, don't copy Nick, but I still think he's good for the sport.
Right, number 2.
So in one of the episodes, I think it's called California Dreaming, which follows Maria Sakkari and Taylor Fritz, there's a situation at Indian Wells where Taylor Fritz, before his match, he's in a practice and he gets injured. He really
Yeah.
hurts his ankle badly, and his team aren't sure what it is, and so the team and Taylor have to make a decision as to whether they're going to play the final. And he's facing Rafael Nadal on a windy day, so great conditions. Such a hard call, and if it was me and you, and we were in that situation, I mean, great, playing Rafa at Indian Wells, I'd be happy.
What would you have done?
I would have done what Paul did, but I would have been really happy that you took the decision off my shoulders and wanted to play.
I think from my perspective, obviously I've had this injury for the last few, I guess, months, and there have been occasions where I've thought to myself, like, I'm in pain, should I step foot on the court and should I not? And from that perspective, sometimes it's a matter of what can I do to make sure that the pain is the least possible, then step out on the court, see how I feel. And if it feels great, then carry on. And if it doesn't feel great, then I can stop and play like 60% for 10-15 minutes and then call it a day.
You know, you mentioned your injury. The benefit of the injury that you had was you knew that what you were doing, you know, even if it felt painful, you weren't going to do it any more harm.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
from Fritz's perspective, he didn't know that. So
he didn't know. It was
it's
risky,
even worse.
but he got the
It's
win,
even worse.
biggest win of his career, I think, and it was the right call in the end.
And right, talking of Rafa Nadal, let's go on to point number, I guess, 2/3, which was in the final episode of the series where there was a little bit of an issue at the French Open where Felix Auger-Aliassime was playing against Rafa Nadal in the next round. He just won his the round before. And of course, at the time, he was being coached by Tony Nadal, who is the uncle, I think, of Rafa,
Yep.
and had obviously coached him for many years before. But from what it seemed like, Tony Nadal kind of said, I don't want Felix to win, I want Rafa to win because he's my nephew and he's family, which made a very kind of awkward and tense conversation / time there, and I'm sure that probably took a hit on the coach-player relationship. So
it was awkward. It seemed awkward anyway when you looked at the Netflix episode. So my opinion on it is, I listened to Tony's opinion, and you've got to accept his values of family is everything, you know, and the Rafa family, they have really strong values, and I completely appreciate that and value that. However, if you look at Patrick Mouratoglou, who voiced his opinion and said, actually, when you're coaching a player, you have that professional relationship, you need to be 100% committed to them. What I think should have happened is if Tony was fully behind Rafa, I don't think he should have taken on another player that had the chance to play against Rafa.
I agree, or beat, because he is a very good player.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say if I were Tony, I wouldn't take on another player while Nadal's still playing. Now, maybe he could have said, Felix, I'm going to train you, I'm going to give you all the tools that you need to beat Rafa, but I'm not going to tell you tactically his weaknesses, because, you know, if they split, Felix could tell everybody on the tour.
That's exactly
you know,
my point I was going to make.
I felt for Felix, you know, when you see that you could see on Felix's face, he didn't really know what to say.
That was so, especially on the bike, if you've seen that bike scene, I watched it with Ashley, and it's just such an awkward encounter where you've got, you know, Tony like around you and you just don't want him there, you don't want that awkward energy there.
Yeah.
I think that's something which I personally hadn't kind of realised at the time. I thought, well, maybe there's something there, but to the extent that it was, I was interested to show that kind of burst open and really see the real inside scoop on that. And
I can kind of see it from Tony's point of view.
Yeah.
But at that level, I think really he probably shouldn't have moved on to a different player at the same time Rafa was playing.
Yeah, I think we kind of both agree on that, and obviously you guys can leave your comments down below with what you think. I think it's going to definitely stir up some different opinions and some long comments there.
So now that we've heard from Ash, I'm going to give my ratings for each episode and an overall rating for part 1 of the series in total. First episode, Nick Kyrgios, the whole drama around the Australian Open. I'm going to give that a 7.5 out of 10. I think there was a great suspense. They followed him throughout the singles and the doubles event. I think it built throughout the episode, which I was really happy with, and obviously finished on a high with him winning the tournament and potentially bringing that positive momentum to the rest of the year. Episode 2 was obviously on Tomljanovic and Berrettini, talking a bit about their relationship. We get an insight into how they live their hotel room, which was super messy, by the way, as well as Berrettini obviously going deep and far in the tournament, but eventually losing to Rafael Nadal, who obviously went on to win the title. I'm going to give that episode a 6 out of 10. I don't think it really went in depth enough, obviously focusing mainly on Berrettini because Tomljanovic went out pretty early. So I think there could have been a little bit more stuff there, a little bit more drama, maybe add in an extra player now that Tomljanovic had kind of gone out pretty early on, but I'm going to give that 6 out of 10. Episode 3, and my personal favourite of all of the episodes, shows the journey of Indian Wells, Maria Sakkari and Taylor Fritz, showing the battles that they had to go through, each of them to make the final. One of them ended up winning, one of them ended up not winning, but Taylor Fritz managed to battle through an ankle injury at the last hour. And it was a great insight to showing the perspective of what a player thinks / what the team thinks behind when someone has such a big injury before such a big match against such a big player. So I'm going to give that episode an 8 out of 10.
my personal favourite. On to episode 4, which was all about Ons Jabeur and Paula Badosa at the Madrid Masters tournament. I think it gave a real perspective into the women's game, especially at one of the Masters 1000 events. I really liked Ons Jabeur. She gave a great vibe off the court and on the court. She's a great fighter and obviously a great advocate for tennis overall, coming from Tunisia, which isn't such a big tennis nation, and she obviously went on to win the title. So I think that encapsulated the episode really well. I'm going to give that episode a 7.5 out of 10 in my opinion. And finally, getting to episode 5, the finale of the series at the French Open, all about Felix Auger-Aliassime and Casper Ruud. Casper Ruud making the final, losing to Nadal, and Aliassime losing to Nadal with a bit of controversy with Tony Nadal and that coaching situation. I think that was my second favourite episode. I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10. I really liked the fact that there was a little bit of controversy, probably the most drama in that episode overall. I think, again, there could have been a little bit more behind the scenes access, but I think overall, my second favourite episode, and I think it ended it on quite a high note. And so in total, my rating for this series, I'm going to rate it a 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it as a whole. I watched it from start to finish pretty much without stopping. And obviously, I think it provided a really good insight, especially more for those non-tennis fans, to bring that new audience to tennis. I think that was the focus of this series. Hopefully the part 2 can provide a little bit more of an insight of behind the scenes for people that are already in the tennis space. Obviously in the next part, the main points that I'm going to be looking for is Emma Raducanu winning the US Open. I think that should be in there. I'm hoping Federer's retirement will be in there, a little bit about the Laver Cup, potentially an episode there. But yeah, if you enjoyed the review, make sure to leave a like down below and leave a comment on what you thought of the series. If you thought any of my opinions were wrong, then also let me know down below. But without further ado, thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.